Purpose of this webinar, first of all, it's to give you an overview of what our new junior competition offer looks like for this year. And in that overview, we'll look at what Tier 1 and Tier 2 is. We'll go through the entry processes and give you a bit more information about hosting events and what goes into hosting an event. It's also a great forum for you to ask questions. We've had loads that have been sent in to us, so we'll address those as we go through. And hopefully you'll get lots of top tips about how to about the competitions and different things that you can do with entry and different intricacies that are out there. And then finally, there'll be a bit of a call to action at the end. You guys are our advocates out there in the community for volleyball, and we really want to capitalize upon your advocacy to reach out to your networks, whether they're school club links or any other institutions that offer volleyball. And we really want you to be able to support us and help to share these opportunities of people to get involved in competitive volleyball opportunities. So what has changed? So the first thing is that from the previous format of the competition, it was a knockout. So there were 4 rounds and teams could get knocked out in any of those 4 rounds. Winners obviously went through to the second, third and the finals. Losers went out, so they might only play 1 match or 1 set of matches. It's now a Grand Prix format. So every team will have the opportunity to play in 3 rounds of competitions, which are individual Grand Prix events. And those Grand Prix events have gone from 1 competition where everybody's in the same event through to 2 competitions or 2 tiers. The top tier being a performance, more performance focused tier. So looking at players and teams that want to compete on a national level. And then the second tier being more developmental, where we're looking to really minimize travel and maximize opportunities in a localized area for people. And that's kind of reiterated in this last point, that travel goes from, previously it was from a regional level through to national, and now it's dependent on your tier. So you have the option of how far you want to travel and what type of competition you want to enter. So in terms of Tier 1, for teams that are considering entering at the Tier 1 level, you must be prepared to travel nationally for all 3 of the rounds. It's looking at the teams that really want to compete at a level that is more performance focused. We're playing the full rules of the sport, 6v6 in all the competitions, and it's really focused around those teams and players that really want to compete at the highest level against the best teams. The 3rd Grand Prix will be hosted by Volleyball England at the National Volleyball Centre, and then there'll be the opportunity to compete at the Cup finals for the top 2 teams that come out of Grand Prix 3. So in terms of the structure of the Tier 1 competition, the first Grand Prix will be seeded. So teams will be selected into pools based on being seeded into separate pools. So it will be a national sort of competition stage, and we're going to be asking the entrants to seed the other teams in their competition. So based on the knowledge that we have from previous rounds and previous years, or not previous rounds, but previous years, and then also the seedings in which teams rank themselves and others, we'll then use that informed judgment to then put teams into pools that allow it to have I guess a range of teams in each pool, because the impact of how teams compete in the first competition will then have a knock-on effect for the second and the third and the Cup finals. So whilst they're isolated events, each Grand Prix also contribute towards Grand Prix series points. So at the end of each Grand Prix, you earn points, which then puts you into an overall standings. So for the second Grand Prix, you'll see that you've got a gold pool, a silver pool and a bronze pool. And based on your overall standings, then the top 4 teams, for example, would go into the gold pool, the next 4 teams would go into the silver, and then the next 4 would go into bronze. And because the gold pool is seen as a sort of more competitive level, teams will then accumulate extra weighted points in that pool, so they'll get double the amount of points that they earn. Silver pool will get 1.5 and bronze will remain the same amount of points. So there'll be a weighting which then carries teams through the competition. And then teams can get promoted and relegated from the gold to the silver to the bronze and vice versa. And it will hopefully, as you go through the competition, even out so that teams are playing at a level that is the right level for them against teams that are as equally matched as possible. Linked to that as well, depending on the number of teams in a pool, there will be different pool points that are accumulated. So if you're a 3-team pool, first will get 4, second will get 3, third will get 2. In a 4-team pool, first will then go up to 5, and then a 5th-team pool, first will get 5 points, and then fifth will go down to 1. So as you can see, when you add the weightings at the bottom, you can see that gold will get double for first place, and so on. So the whole point of this is that we want to reward the teams who are playing against the most competitive matches against the highest rated teams. So this is kind of that in practice. So we've kind of mimicked using random places in the country, a sort of how this could play out. So as you can see in Grand Prix 1, Manchester, Birmingham and Plymouth all won their pool, which means that they'll go into the gold. And then the best second place team, which was London, will also go into the gold as well. And then the next 4 teams will go into the silver, and then the next 5 teams will go into the bronze. They'll then compete in the gold, silver and bronze competitions in Grand Prix 2. And then they'll have their points weighted, which will then give them their overall standings, where London then get relegated, Nottingham win their Grand Prix 2 silver tier and get promoted, and then Leicester and Liverpool swap as well from silver to bronze and vice versa. So there will be movement between the tiers, and that's why each Grand Prix is really important, that teams compete and are put in the right Grand Prix at the start based on those seedings. In terms of entry costs at Tier 1, it's £30 for entry for the first 2 Grand Prix, and then the third Grand Prix is 65, which will contribute towards the National Volleyball Centre costs. In the first 2 Grand Prix, there will be teams that host, and teams that are visiting the hosting team will pay £25 or 25%, whichever is the least, to that hosting team to help support the costs of that venue. So we're trying to encourage and ensure that the venue hosts, it's an appealing thing for them to do, and obviously they'll have no travel and so on. So we're on the lookout and hope that all teams here are happy to host and use their venues, and we'll go through that a little bit later. In addition to the team entry costs, the player entry costs are now £5 for the whole competition. So if you compete in 6 Grand Prix events, it's still £5. It's just a one-off fee of £5 for your player, each individual player, to enter and register that in that event. So now looking into Tier 2. Tier 2, as we mentioned, is more development focused, and the real emphasis on Tier 2 is to try and get as many people playing as possible, as many teams competing in as much localized competition as possible. And we've had questions that have come in to say, well, how far will I travel? And whilst we'd love to give you an answer to say, well, it's only 20 miles or it's only going to be county based, we seriously don't know the answer at this stage until we get our entries in. As you saw at the start, the expression of interests have been really high, and we've had some engagement with schools, and we have had lots of engagements with our clubs, and the knowledge that we've had so far for our from our club network is that there's an absolute boom in junior volleyball, which is fantastic. So we really do hope that there'll be lots of teams entering at Tier 2. So I guess the real message for Tier 2 is don't be discouraged if you're a newly formed team. We want as many teams as possible to enter, and the focus of Tier 2 is about giving opportunity for people to play volleyball. And linked to that is geographically, we want to make it as close as possible. Reduced fees are also there to try and encourage. And in the first Grand Prix of the under-15s, it's free of charge, because we see that that's the real starting point for juniors into these competitions. So take all the barriers away. Let's try and get them entered. So in terms of the format of Tier 2, at under-15s, it's 4v4. So we aim to be playing on the outside tram lines of badminton courts. People have asked questions around the equipment to use, and things like wall net sliders are absolutely perfect to use if venues have those, because They offer 4 courts to be played on at once, and it's a good format or piece of equipment that works well. When you move up to 16s and 18s, 6v6 courts. However, we want to also encourage short courts if venues only have that capacity. So it's going to be flexible, and whereas Tier 1 is more going to be regimented in its rules and more strict, Tier 2 is going to be more flexible. And if teams make an arrangement in their pool that they're going to play it with a short court, absolutely fine. We want that flexibility for people to not use things like smaller facilities as a barrier to being involved and taking part. So in terms of the structure, for 3 Grand Prix again, first Grand Prix, well, basically all the Grand Prix are going to be split into pools of 3, 4, or 5, aiming for pools of 4 because that's an optimal number. And the primary thing that we're going to work on is where teams are based. So the more geographically close that you are, we'll create clusters for those pools to take part. For the second Grand Prix, we will aim to try and mix teams up into a new cluster. However, if it means that teams then have to travel double the distance, we won't. So once again, the emphasis is on reducing travel time and ensuring that teams aren't having to travel across the country to compete, because that's not what schools are bought in for, and that's what I imagine a lot of teams that are in Tier 2 are bought in for as well. And then the third Grand Prix, once again, we will also try to mix the teams up and maybe segment by how they perform, so that teams then get to play competitively against each other based on their performances in the first couple of Grand Prix. But that isn't the emphasis again. It's all about trying to be as local as we can. So it'll be a balance throughout this competition to ensure that teams are not put off by travel, but do get to play other teams where possible. In terms of entry costs, as I mentioned, the first Grand Prix for the under-15s is free, and then all the other Grand Prix are £15. The venue costs, once again, will replicate Tier 1, so it will be a £25 contribution or 25%, whichever is the cheapest. So that will go directly to the host. And then player entry costs are £5 as well for Tier 2 entrants. One of the key bits of feedback that we got at Tier 2 is that Volley Zone is too complicated. And for people that are setting up for the first time, haven't used Volley Zone before, they might be a school, they might be a really small group of people that haven't ever used or don't really have an infrastructure in place. We don't want the entry process to put people off. So what we've done is we've simplified the entry process, and we as Volleyball England are going to input data to get teams across the line. So the way that we're going to do that is, first of all, teams will enter a form which says, I'm the organizer of this team, this is my club, and this is the number of teams that I want to enter. Once they've submitted that to us, we'll then set their team up, we'll set their player profile up, we'll give you your password, and then we'll give you the instructions to go onto Volley Zone and enter your teams into the Grand Prix that you'd like to enter. So it will literally just be, this is where to go and this is what to enter. We'll also send out a spreadsheet. So rather than people entering players and registering players as you go, the spreadsheet will be, these are the parents, these are the players, and we'll then create all of those accounts on Volley Zone and get everybody set up. And then it will be down to the players to register themselves on Volley Zone with the instructions that we give. There'll also be the option for clubs to buy vouchers for their players. So you could buy, if you had 10 players in your team, you could buy 10 vouchers of player registrations, and we'll then apply those vouchers so that all the players are registered without the players having to log on. So we feel that this is our sort of compromise of trying to listen to what people are saying whilst also still benefiting from having the information of who's playing and doing our job as a governing body to support people through their journey in volleyball and ensure that people are a part of us and we can support them with what's going on and understand where people access the sport and give them opportunities. Before I move on to hosting, has anybody got any questions? I've seen that quite a few chat questions have come in. Does anybody want to voice those to the group? Shall I read them out? Okay, right, I've got some hands up. We'll go with that first. Alan, do you want to unmute and ask your question? Oh, Alan, you're on mute still.
Sorry, it's not clear to me whether the under 15 tier 1 is going to be 6v6 or 4v4.
That'll be 6v6.
Oh, that's good. I was hoping you'd say that.
Thanks, Alan. Kate?
Yeah, it's just about that 25% contribution if there's 3, 4 or 5 teams.
Yeah.
How does that work?
So that was not strictly true, the 25%. Well, it was strictly true for 4 teams, but if there are 5 teams, it will go down to £25 or 20%. So then it'll be split 5 ways, whichever is the cheapest. And then for 3, we haven't actually thought of 3, but it'll probably go to 33%. So it's basically an even divide,
Sure.
or the cheapest.
Great.
And I'm guessing it's Little Giants VC that got the hand up as well.
Oh, hi, Rob. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Hi there. Hi again. So, you know, the procedure for players to register, are we still okay? Because we've already sent an email out to our juniors to register on VolleyZone, and we've sent a little screen recording how to buy their membership, you know, their £5 membership, and ask to join the teams. Is that still acceptable, or should we go via the form you've just explained?
So for tier 1, that is the correct procedure. For tier 2, that's also absolutely fine, because you're ahead of the game, but you have the option for us to create people's accounts, and for us to basically set every player up so that they can go in and do what you've asked them to do.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So yeah, absolutely fine. Any other questions?
Sorry, Rob, I've got another one. It's the same hand.
Okay.
It's Kate, sorry. I don't know if you're going to come to rules and regulations later and player validity.
We will touch on it. We haven't finalised our regulations, but there are quite a few FAQs that have come in that we've addressed through later on in this presentation. So there won't be a finalised set of regulations yet, but it's in progress, and we're just trying to complete it before we send it live. Okay,
so shall I wait and see if my questions
come? So there'll be an FAQ section coming up in a minute, which we'll run through.
Okay, great.
Super. So in terms of hosting events, as you know, there's a lot of Grand Prix that are happening. So there's 36 different Grand Prix across the tiers, across the genders, across the age groups. And the requirement for hosting is massive, this competition. And we hope it's going to be massive when hopefully there'll be lots of teams that enter. So we're seeking all teams that are entering them to offer to host at least one event. Hopefully our guidance out there and the forms that we've sent out are as clear as they can be for what it is to host and the information that you need to know. But I'll talk you through some of the information that we've shared. So in terms of hosting itself, essentially there needs to be a lead person that's in charge of running the event, and they'll do things like coordinating the venue, ensuring it's booked, sending out the information to all the other teams in the pool about arrangements for coming to their venue, whether it's the address, whether it's the timings and so on. We got things like the score sheets, which we'll send out, the officials for the competition, which teams will hopefully be able to organise, and then producing the results for us at the end of the competition. As part of the organizer, we will create a pack of information which has got all the templates, it's got guidance, it'll have information around things like safeguarding, which we'll touch on in a minute, and yeah, hopefully it will have everything that teams will need, and we'll get feedback from people as we go through. If there's anything else, we'll add to it. So there'll be a pack of information that will give you what you need to run your event. In terms of the venue itself, as you can see, you've got different specifications for different types of venues, from tier 1, the 6v6 court like you'd normally see in a local, regional, national league. And then for tier 2 under 15, 4v4 badminton courts. So we're looking for venues that have got your badminton court markings, and then hopefully wall net sliders or equivalents that can be used for the net. And then for the tier 2 under 16s and 18s, short court is fine. So for example, if your venue has got 2 widthways courts that don't have runoff area at the back, but they're suitable to try and get people playing, then we're also going to be hopefully fine with that. And I guess the more entries or more people that offer to host venues, the more opportunity we have to choose which is the best venue geographically for people to travel to, so that we minimize travel and we ensure that people get the best possible experience. Dave, Penny, did you have your hand up?
Hi. I got just about through that form about hosting.
Yeah.
And then it was a very long list of events that you had to say which one. And at the minute, I'm not really sure which ones we can do. We're negotiating use of another sports hall at the minute, but it's got this, and it might have 4 courts. We might be able to do that, but we might not. But we don't know yet. So I don't really know what to do with filling in all those. We're very willing, but I can't exactly say yes at the minute. So I don't really know what to do with that.
Yeah, and it's hard because ultimately we can't commit to saying yes or no either for the future Grand Prix, because it will depend on which pool your teams are in and so on. So it's going to be a real balancing act. And when we go into this next slide, which looks at, on the right hand side, you see when the number of days that we've got from when we notify you of your host to when the event's actually taking place. So it's fine for Grand Prix 1, where you've got us notifying teams in December for pools to happen in January. But then when you get to the second Grand Prix, there's a short period of time between the middle of January and the start of February for the Grand Prix to take place. So there'll be quite a limited amount of time in which we'll have to work really quickly to get the pools out and let you know that you're hosting in order for you to book and make arrangements. So we appreciate the pain that might cause, and we understand that it's not an ideal scenario, but because the Grand Prix are clustered together in such a way, and the fact that we won't know the pools until the conclusion of the previous pool, we've set really tight timescales for ourselves to get them out, but we understand that you will also have a tight timescale as well. So with all that said, I think the best thing you can probably do is notify us of when you would intend to host or hope to host without it being an actual commitment that you can host, because we understand that in some scenarios your venue might not be available. So we will go out to hosts to confirm your availability before we say yes. So it's not an actual sort of, it's a hopeful commitment, but not a firm commitment that you can host.
Cool. I'm just flipping back to the registration of juniors. If they are already registered in the National League, do they still register for this? Do they have to pay an extra £5 basically?
Yeah.
They do. Right. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. So yeah, just touching on this slide. So we've got a form which is on the website, which is your hosting form to complete, which has got all the dates on. And if you are privileged to have a venue that has flexibility and you've got dates that you're available to host, that you know you're available to host, that's fantastic. If you're in a situation where you can't confirm at this stage, we'd still encourage you to complete this form and give us the knowledge of your venue that you'd hope to host at and when your hopeful dates are to host those Grand Prix. In terms of the duration, as you can see on the left, you've got sort of a matrix of the number of courts that you might have and then the length of booking depending on the number of teams in the pool. We typically aim for 14 pools. So with that in mind, you're looking at around a 5-hour booking for your venue in order to host. I think that's everything on hosting. Has anybody got any other questions?
Alan's got his hand up.
Hi, Alan.
I'm in the fortunate position of having access to a 2-court sports hall.
Fantastic.
Good courts, decent wood floor, one net better than the other. But if we were to offer to host, and I intend to,
yep,
and you're going for 14 pools, the other half of the hall, conceivably, if it was going to be, for example, a boys' competition in the other half, would it be possible to get somebody else to run that?
So somebody else hosts at your venue?
Yeah.
Yeah,
If
I don't see any
in
reason
one
why not.
boys in the other.
Yeah, no, we absolutely see that as a possibility. If you've got a situation where, even if you are an experienced club and know how to run these competitions, but your venue is not suitable, we'd absolutely ask you to buddy up with a venue that is suitable and then host there. So we are looking for people to be flexible and thoughtful about what's the best way of offering as many hosting venues as possible.
It's always going to be easier for me to book both courts rather than to book one. It suits the sports hall better.
Fantastic. And you could have a tier 1 on one court and a tier 2 on the other, and there's a whole variance of options there. So that's great.
Helen had a question.
I was just, I don't know if you're going to cover it, but just around referees, because I haven't checked, but I don't know if these dates, there must be some clashes with NVRs, and I know refs are in short supply. So what standard of officials are needed? Is it just tier 1 under 18s that need the official refs, or?
Yeah, so this was one of the questions we asked when we were going through it, and the vast majority of teams said that they wanted to self-officiate.
Yeah.
So that's what we're expecting for most of the competitions, is self-officiating. So no call on NVR refs.
Good. I thought that was the case.
Thanks, Helen. Kate, do you have your hand up again, or did you not take it down?
No, I'm sorry, I do have it up again.
That's fine, not a problem.
I'm just a bit confused by these duration and the number of courts and things, only because we've got a 2-court venue, but it's only available for 3 hours.
Okay.
So what does that kick us out of hosting, or we can have a 2-court venue or it's a 6-court badminton, 6 badminton courts or 2 full courts, but only available for 3 hours. So can we do anything in that time? I can't work that out.
So based on what we've got here, so a 14 pool over 2 courts is 3 rounds of fixtures, which you can then fit into a 3-hour period of time.
So are they best of 3 matches, are they? Best of 3 sets?
Yes.
You sounded hesitant.
I think they are. Can you confirm that, James?
I'd hope so, because that doesn't sound like enough time.
Yeah, so Kate, I haven't done the maths in my head either, but you've run loads of competitions. You know how many rounds you can get into, how many courts. So, if you think you can host a competition with the number of teams in a pool, then you're good to go. Simple as that.
God. Okay, so 4 teams, and they're all playing each other.
Yep.
Okay, so round robin with a pool of 4.
Yep.
All right. And
we would leave you flexibility, right? So if you were running short and you wanted to play to 21 instead of 25, then that's the sort of thing that we expect people to, running these sessions to make those executive decisions to make sure that the event gets finished.
Okay. Even with tier 1 under 18s.
Yeah, even with tier 1. I mean, again, we would hope that because of the way that we're doing it, i.e. asking people what they've got and what they've got available, we'll be able to make sure that we're not squeezed. But, who knows, right? If it turns out to be a really close, every match is a tight game that goes to, I don't know, 30-28, then, you can always be running out of time, right?
You can. Okay, so it's a bit flexible. Fine, thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Nick?
I was just going to jump on that one and say, yes, you could fit with 2 courts, 4 teams. The only thing you'd have to think about is the refereeing then, because all 4 teams would be playing at the same time. So that would be just the one obstacle to get over. But if a club's running it and can actually provide the referees for that 3 hours, I think you've covered it then. And that's quite neat, particularly if teams have to travel quite a distance, you know, for 3-hour play. That would help the situation.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Nick. Anybody else with their hand still up that still wants to ask a question? Okay, so a few of the questions that we've had asked so far. We'll start from the top left. So people have asked what's classified as an under 18. So it goes with the academic year. So people born on or after the 1st of September, 2006 for the under 15s, 2005 for the 16s, and 2003 for the 18s. Going down to the bottom left, can a player play for just one team? So the answer is no, they can play for as many teams as they like. Essentially, there is a flexibility. It's restricted to the number of Grand Prix. So you can only play for one team per Grand Prix. So Grand Prix 1, you can play for one team. Grand Prix 2, you can play for one team. Grand Prix 3, you can play for one team. Obviously, that's unlikely that will happen. Teams are much more players are much more likely to play for the same team throughout. However, there is the opportunity for people to move to different teams, play at different tiers, and so on. So in this example here, you've got somebody, this is the teams that they could play for across all of the Grand Prix. So Manchester under 15s Grand Prix 1, Liverpool in Grand Prix 2, Manchester in Grand Prix 3, and then Manchester again in the finals. For the under 16s, they could play for Liverpool A and B, but in different Grand Prix again. And then for the bottom 2 examples of Birmingham and London, if you haven't played in a previous round, you can't play in the finals. So that's the only qualifier which we have. So you need to have played in a previous competition, Grand Prix 1, 2, or 3, to then be able to be eligible to compete in the finals. Moving on to the top right, can my team change tiers if they're at the wrong level? So we realise that it's a very challenging thing to choose which tier is the most appropriate for you. And basically the answer is absolutely yes. If you enter tier 1 and you realise, well, actually, my team's not ready for tier 1, you're more than welcome to enter the 2nd and 3rd Grand Prix down at tier 2. Moving the other way from tier 2 to tier 1, we'd like to say yes, but it kind of depends on things like numbers. So if we've got an optimal number in a group, say 12, for example, and you're the 13th team, it might not work out, or there might not be capacity for that extra team to be in the competition. So it kind of depends. We're not going to say no to people at this stage, but it will depend on an application and the circumstance of, or an email and the circumstance of what the landscape looks in that competition. So the other thing to note is if you move from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 1, you're not going to have accumulated any pool points. So you'll probably then be in the bottom, maybe the bronze pool for the following Grand Prix, because you won't have accumulated as many points as the other teams. Before we move on to the last one, Stuart, I can see your hand's a new hand up. Do you want to ask your question?
Hi. Not really a question, really a point.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of schools that I do run their after schools club. I told them about the nationals and they were really interested, and then I gave them the link for the web site on Volleyball England, and I think it put them off because obviously they're PE teachers and not volleyball players.
Okay.
Well, so this is just for remember for the next time round. Can we make it just a bit more inviting for new people? Does that make sense?
What do you think it was that put them off?
I guess for the first time, because it's got tiers in it, then obviously it's not what they were expecting. I probably set them up wrong as well by saying, yeah, it's a national knockout competition, and they probably just wanted to get in for 2 rounds and that. So, but in my mind, I know that next year I'll have the same conversation again. And I think it can only benefit us to have those PE teachers take those kids into the competition.
Okay. I mean, it's not too late for them to enter, and there is flexibility about the number of Grand Prix that they enter as well. So if they want to enter 1 or 2 of them,
well, I'm going to try and push them towards the tier 2.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, but as I said, it was surprising because they were dead keen. They're paying me, so they were dead keen on their kids, and their kids all turn up. But to get them into competition is kind of heartbreaking for a coach because, you know, that reluctance is kind of not what we want.
We'd also be more than happy to speak to them to put their mind at rest at how we're trying to make it as easy as possible for them. So if you want to send us their details, we can get in touch and we can give them as easy a process as possible for them to enter and explain it to them.
Okay, we would really appreciate that feedback because we've been trying really hard to make it as simple as possible. So if we've done something that's put them off, with the feedback of what it is that we've done is kind of key.
Yeah. So to me as a volleyball player, this is fantastic. It's just that, you know, for some reason there is explosion of volleyball at junior level. You know, there's only so many things I can cover, isn't it? So I've got to look after my own club. But it's heartbreaking to, you know, not tell these kids that, oh, there's a national competition going on. But, you know, it's almost like they're outside of it. Do you see what I mean?
Yep, understood. And yeah, like I say, pass on their details and we'll get in touch and help them through the process, give them the information.
Okay.
Thanks, Stu. Is it Marion?
Yes. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Marion.
Sorry to bother you. 2 quick questions. You mentioned that a player who plays for 2 different teams then can only play with a team A, for example, in the finals, if he's played before with team A. I was just wondering, for just one team, would a player have had to play in Grand Prix 1, 2, and 3 to then be allowed to go to the finals as well? Or is that rule just for players who are playing in 2 teams?
No, so that's for everybody. So everybody qualifies to play for the final by playing at least 1 Grand Prix for that team.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question was, you mentioned how referees don't necessarily need to be what's the word, official, have received training, as it's more of a sort of friendly self-officiating. Would that be the case as well in terms of the member of staff bringing the team? Would that have to be a qualified coach, or for example a PE teacher, or just, you know, someone that has a volleyball club? Is that okay, or do you need a qualified coach to bring a team to a Grand Prix?
We've got that question covered in the next slide, so we will go through it, and yeah, there's definitely one that we need to cover. So
thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Marion. Anybody else new that's got their hand up? Dave?
Hi, it's just the getting the understanding right in terms of the costs. The if it's 15 or 30, depending on the level of the Grand Prix, then you mentioned about it's another £25. Is that in addition to the 30, or is that included in the 30?
That's in addition.
So that's the confusion bit, because you know, it would have been easy to say that it's a one fee, because you having is add on, and then you got the £5 add on for each player.
So the £30 comes to Volleyball England through VolleyZone, and then the £25 goes to the host. So they're 2 separate transactions, but they're a total cost of £55. So yeah, we basically split it because we didn't want to say £55 comes to Volleyball England, because it doesn't. But the cost for you is £55 because it's distributed amongst the host and the entry.
Yeah, it's £55 for the first competition, plus £5 per player for every one that's in your squad as well. That's
correct. Yeah, and then those players can play in as many competitions across different age groups. So yeah, they'll get lots of.
The concept here, and I'm sure Nick will leap in and re-emphasize this, is we were trying to get the kids to be able to play for £10 per day for playing, and that's effectively what it works out to be. You know, 6 players, 60 quid, £10 a player for a day's volleyball. We thought that was practical, reasonable, and kind of got us to the right sort of ballpark.
Okay.
Thanks, Dave. Any other questions at this stage? Okay, so the last one to point out is my under 15 team can my under 15 team enter more than one competition? So as I'm sure that you're aware, we don't want to push young people and teams to play too much, to strain themselves and to be unfair on sort of the welfare of young people. But it's not banned in that if there are circumstances where your team would really benefit because you've got an exceptional team that wants to push itself into maybe the next age group up in a lower tier, that is possible. So we're kind of not encouraging it, but also it's not a regulation that it can't happen. So just be aware of your circumstances, your team, your squad size, and make an informed decision based on your circumstances. Yes, Mike?
Yeah, hi, Rob. Just quickly on the age group classified as under 15, under 16, under 18. I actually have a player that's her birth date is on the 1st of the 9th, 2006.
Yep.
So she's eligible for under 15?
Yep. So from the 1st of September. So if you're on the 31st of August, you're too old. The 1st of September, you are eligible to play in that competition.
Super. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's probably easier to look at it as school years. So if a kid's in year 10, that's under 15s, year 11 is under 16s, and upper 6 is under 18s. And that helps to sort it out in the kids' minds. If that helps.
Yeah, as long as then, yeah, go on, sorry, Nick.
I was just going to say, now on the other one is that playing for, can you play in under 15s, 16s, 18s as one player? The thing is you can't play the under 15 tier 2 and under 15 tier 1 because they're on at the same time, aren't they? So that's right. That's one issue that you can't do. So you're in either tier 1 or tier 2 for that particular age band.
Yeah. So the whole of Grand Prix 1, you can only play for one team, whether that's tier 1 or 2. Super. Any other questions? No. Okay, starting from the top left then, what happens if my team can't make a Grand Prix? We've kind of addressed this already, but essentially, yes, you can compete in less than 3 Grand Prix throughout the season. For tier 2, it won't affect any status in the competition because they're all not based on your performance as such. They're more based on where you're based at, your location, geography. For tier 1, if you do miss a Grand Prix, then obviously it will affect your overall Grand Prix series points. But you'll still be able to re-enter that competition, and you'll probably have to play at the bronze tier, for example, if that's the lowest tier of that competition. Going on to the top right, so in tier 1, is there a limit of teams that can play in Grand Prix 3 in Kettering? So the answer is yes. So we've set individual dates for boys and girls across the under 15s, 16s and 18s. And the top 8 teams, there'll be a limit of 8 basically teams that will compete in Kettering, and any tier 1 team. So if we got 12 teams, for example, in that competition, we'd find an alternative venue for the remaining 4 teams out of that 12 to compete. Moving on to the coaching requirements that are necessary for my team to enter. So we would obviously recommend level 2 coaches because they're head coaches and they would have gone through qualifications and training and gained all the sort of knowledge and expertise as a head coach. However, we also understand that looking at the country at the moment in terms of number of level 2 coaches per team, we've probably got about 20% of teams that have got level 2 coaches. So what we don't want to do is be really prohibitive and be very strict about level 2 only can take a team, because we know that that would really reduce the number of people that were able to enter competitions and really affect the experience that's created. So what we really want to emphasize is that the person that takes the team has to be competent, obviously, and they need to be somebody that you as a club feel comfortable sending. We've got some safeguarding requirements, which we'll go on in a minute, which we recommend for all team leaders and people in charge to have. And yeah, essentially, we're not going to be strict on it being a level 2 coach. We're going to be more open to teams being able to send somebody that they feel is suitable and kind of briefed by the team on their requirements and the understanding of being in charge of young people.
So just before you move on, Rob, so just Hanneke's asked the question, the problem with there's no coach training. So yeah, understood. We're busy trying to get those courses laid on. But I'd also just take a step a bit wider. So I think that, you know, there's lots of PE teachers that are likely to be involved in that. Those people are also eminently qualified to bring a team. So you know, don't just focus on the level 2 coaching. There's lots of other people who would be suitably qualified to bring a team along. That should not be a barrier to entering teams.
Yeah. The other question linked to sort of people being in charge, whether that's you hosting an event or you taking a team, is around the sort of safeguarding requirements, which obviously is something that's really important for the safety of young people. So we recommend that adults in the position of trust, which is the leader of the team or somebody hosting the event. So everybody that's part of this competition will be affiliated to Volleyball England, every club, and therefore you'll able to access a free DBS check. So we'd encourage you to come in, send an email to info@volleyballengland.org and put people through the DBS because that's another layer of sort of security and you being sort of, yeah, more comfortable with everybody that's leading your young people. There's also online safeguarding training. So previously UK Coaching delivered face-to-face courses. They've now gone online, so it's a lot easier for people to attend. And it's 3 hours in the evening to attend a course, which gives people the awareness and understanding of being in charge of young people and signs of things like abuse and understanding what to do in case of a safeguarding concern. So really recommend that teams that are entering put people on that course and make sure that people are DBS checked. And if you've got any queries about that, feel free to send them through and we can give the guidance and information on that. Hanneke, have you got a question?
Hi, yes, it's just in regards to the safeguarding training. I currently have 3 because as previously I was childminder, I'm a student nurse, and I also am a volunteer for CGL with young children in care. Would that be validated as something that you would accept, or do I need to do another one through the recommended UK coaching?
I think through your profession, if you have continuous training in safeguarding, then that's more than suitable to cover the safeguarding knowledge and understanding that you would need. So yeah, happy that if you do face sort of regular training that's got certification, then that will replace what the requirements are here.
Brilliant, thank you. And as well, I was wondering in regards to first aid training, what are the requirements of how many people need to be on site having pediatric first aid, or what is the requirements for that? Thank you.
I think my answer would be it would be down to a venue having suitable first aid requirements and equipment. So whether that was the venue that had that equipment and that person that could deal with first aid, or whether that's an individual on that site. If you're in a school site that didn't had like a caretaker or someone, then somebody would have to perform that first aid role, which would be a basic sort of first aid at work or first aid training that you would do. I think that's the right answer. James, Nick, have you got any further understanding of that?
No, I must admit that for us, we have a combination, right? So I did my first aid as part of my coaching qualification, and we rely on the venue. They have a first aider on site, and that's how I cover my first aid requirements. For me personally, I always look when I go to a venue and think about what's the risk assessment? Have I seen the risk assessment? Do I know how those sorts of things are covered? You know, at the end of the day, what I wouldn't want people to do is say we can't do it because we don't have a qualified first aider. There's always a way around it. So if you're stuck with that, have a chat with us and we'll work with you to find a solution.
I'd just say that you normally have your training sessions anyway, and what's the first aid situation. In that case, if it's at a sports centre, the sports centre will have someone. If not, your club will have someone covering that. So it shouldn't be any different to a normal training session, I would say.
Thank you both. Has anybody else got any questions? I see lots of hands up. I don't know whether they haven't been taken down. Okay, so the last one is, how much travel will my tier 2 team have to do? Whilst we'd like to give you an answer, as I explained earlier, it's hard for us to give you an exact answer on it, because it will depend on the volume of teams in your area and how many enter. So we're going to try and keep it to a minimum, and we'll do what we can to reduce travel time and create the most volleyball per mile traveled possible. Okay, moving on. So the final bit that I wanted to talk about was around your advocacy. So your word of mouth is way more powerful than what we can achieve at Volleyball England. And Stuart's example earlier of how he's got 2 people that want to enter teams, we wouldn't know about those teams unless Stuart had those links into the community and did the coaching that he does. So you guys have great advocates on a local level for volleyball, and we'd really hope and encourage you to be those advocates of this competition and the opportunity for young people to play across the country. So as advocates, we'd love you to reach out to all the people that you know that are involved in volleyball, whether they're schools, colleges, different clubs that are out there, or any other institutions, and share the opportunity to enter the Grand Prix series. Explain that Tier 2 is very much around development, and it's not a barrier that you haven't played lots, you haven't got a fantastic setup at the moment, because it's about giving people opportunity rather than performance. In return, the support that we'll offer you is we'll keep you up to date with the entrants in your area, and we'll give you the knowledge of who's entered. So hopefully it will unlock some new teams that are out there, new schools, new colleges that you might not be aware of, and we'll share any new material. So one of the things that we talked about was, let's create a simplified set of rules that not the FIVB rules of the game, because they're hundreds of pages long and people have got no idea about them that haven't played the sport before. So let's create a 2-pager that's got very simple instructions about the sport, and try and dumb it down as much that allows people to understand things and not feel like it's a barrier to take part. And we really hope that this will result in the growth of volleyball in your area, get more teams entering and playing, and more localized competition. Right, I think that is everything in terms of what I was hoping to go through. Is there any further questions and anything else that we can hopefully clarify at this stage? Right, so we'll start with Kate from the first hand I saw.
Oh, thanks, Rob. I just want to say I think it's fantastic what you're doing, and I would like to say it's been a long time coming, because I know you've worked so hard on it, all of you, and I'm really excited. I think it's brilliant. I've told lots of people about it already. So my main question, and I think you answered it, is player eligibility. And in the past few years, it's about players from different clubs then coming and playing for teams. So if there's a situation where there's a player in an adult club which doesn't have a junior team, but they're not part of our club, can they become part of our club for this competition?
Yep, absolutely. They are more than welcome to. Yep, right. People can play from different clubs.
Brilliant. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Kate. Helen?
Yeah, just going back to the age groups. So you said about not playing in the same Grand Prix. So I've got a number of players that I could enter in under 18, under 16, under 15. Could that one player play in all of those competitions in each Grand Prix?
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine.
They're all on separate dates.
Exactly. And just on dates, I thought it was boys one day, girls the next day, but I've just noticed there's a clash towards the end of a couple of dates, and that's quite a strain on coaching, because there's basically just myself who can coach the juniors. So
Which date is that you can see that?
Well, I've got 9th of April is under 15 boys and girls, and then 26th of March is under 16 boys and.
So that's for tier 1, because that will be the last stages of the tier 1 Grand Prix 3 that's hosted at the National Volleyball Centre.
I think it's tier 2 as well. Anyway, I'll double check.
Okay. I'll have a look and yeah.
I'll get back to you separately once I look at it in more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Kevin?
Hey, Rob. Thanks for hosting this. This is actually fantastic and very informative, so I appreciate it. Just questions related to Tier 1. So I'm not sure if it'd be helpful to flip back to the Tier 1 point system. I'm just looking at kind of your point system. So the 3-team pool, 4-team pool. And I'm just thinking if Tier 1 only has 7 teams, I appreciate we don't want to give the full scale for a 3-team pool, but it really disadvantages your top seeded team because they're only earning 8 points, even though they're seed number 1. So I'm not sure if that's still up for discussion or consideration, but if you only have 7 tier 1 teams, really your second seed gets more points than your first seed overall for winning the pool. So
yes, that's a valid point. It's a tricky trade-off because if you then have the same amount of points, somebody that wins a pool of 3 gets the same as somebody that wins a pool of 4.
I see what you're saying. I just think that punishes the lowest common denominator as opposed to punishing the top tier team.
Yeah,
but
I think just to be clear though, we wouldn't make the top tier the 3 pool.
Yeah, we'd make it 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
That
would never be the case. It'd always be the top tier that had the more teams in it.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
if you seed snake like, then it creates an unbalanced pool technically based on seeding.
Okay, we'll have a look into this.
Okay, sounds good.
Feedback and we'll try and model it and see what.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of variables, that's for sure. And then for Grand Prix 4, is there an opportunity, or at least for the finals, is there an opportunity to host 4 teams as opposed to just 2 teams coming down?
I'm sure James will be able to answer that one.
No, unfortunately, the Cup weekend is there's a couple of things. So first of all, there's an assumption that we're going to be running Cup finals, and that's our current plan. Obviously, if COVID impacts us, it may be possible that we run no Cup final and there is no Cup final weekend. If we do run the Cup final weekend, the Cup final weekend is absolutely packed. So you've got the men's final, the women's final, the men's shield, the women's shield, the sitting, and then all of the age group competitions. So there is no extra space to have an extra set of matches. It just literally will not fit.
Okay, yeah. Just in our example, you kind of feel for Nottingham who cracks that top pool, but then doesn't get to play in the Cup final. But okay.
That's why the seeding in round 1 is really important, so that teams can be separated into pools, so that you have the opportunity to come top and then get in the gold tier, and that then helps your chances as you go through.
Okay, that leads me to my final question. Will Volleyball England provide guidance to coaches on some guiding principles on how to seed? I'm just being mindful that we haven't played volleyball for 2 years and folks may not know the skill level of different teams across the country.
Yeah, so this was a conversation. You can imagine that there is no perfect answer to this question on seeding. In the same way as you guys don't know, we don't either. But what we do know is that the people who are best placed to make those decisions are you as coaches. You're likely to have played or know the teams that are close to you, and we'll look at that when we get your rankings back. So if Stuart's view of Little Giants is different to yours, then we'll take that into consideration as we try and work out what the right seedings. It's going to be tough. I mean, we're going to ask you to bear with us. This is a brand new conversation. There's a whole load of learnings that we're doing as we're going along, and we're trying to do the best with a lot of uncertainties. So please bear with us. If we get it wrong, we'll learn from it and do better next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Kevin. Mike, have you got your hand up again, or is that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. Just a quick one on the finals weekend, April, whatever it is, 9th or whatever it is. You've got under 15, under 16, under 18. Do you have the who's going to play on which dates?
That hasn't been set yet. Would that be useful for you to know sooner rather than later, which day it's on?
I mean, it doesn't have to be today. I just I just wanted to know, just from that perspective. But no, it's just wanted to know if you knew.
No, we haven't set that yet. I haven't even thought about it yet. But yeah,
That's
understand. Yeah, we'll circulate that as soon as we've got a better idea that it's definitely happening. And yeah.
Yeah, much appreciated for bringing that forward, by the way, from our last conversation out of May and back into April, because I think that'll just help a lot of us kind of draw a line underneath the indoor season and move into beach. So that's good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. Any other questions? Has everybody had their questions answered on the chat? I've seen that people have been trying to answer them as we've gone. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for your time. Really appreciate it, and really pleased to see that there's so much interest. And yeah, if you've got any questions in the build up to the deadlines, or you want any further clarifications, please do get in touch. We will be sending the regulations through. I'm hopeful in the next week, which will then give a bit more clarity in certain situations that you might arise. But otherwise, thank you and have a good evening.